All right, welcome back to the BDK Movie Show live on right here on 106.7 The Fan in Washington, D.C. I'm now joined by, in my opinion, one of the best working actors today, Dominic Cooper. Dominic, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Doing all right. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And The Devil's Double is playing in D.C. theaters today. It starts right here in D.C. at Bethesda Row, Landmark East Street Cinemas, and AMC Lowe's Georgetown. First of all, I have to ask you, because you're playing both of these roles, and for people out there in the audience who might not know technically how you're able to play both of the roles, can you walk me through maybe a sequence where Latif and Uday are maybe talking and then maybe touching each other? Because there's moments where they touch and you kind of have to do different techniques to act those parts out.
Well, that's right. I mean, the most simple technique that we use, and because of our budget was rather low, and so was our time was very tight, we'd often I'd perform the scene as Uday first, and if you've seen the film, Uday is much more of a dynamic, outrageous character. He sort of controls the scene. He creates the architecture of the scene. So he's the strong presence and dynamics within a scene. So I'd often be him first for the first master shot. We'd then have a controlled camera called a motion controlled camera, which would be on a track that would it would have a brain, and it would memorize the exact movement it did. So I'd do that scene first as him, and I'd run off, change into Latif mode, and the camera would do replicate the same movement. We could then paste basically the same shot over one another, and therefore have both Latif and Uday standing there. But you brought up a very good point there, which was when they physically contact one another, which often I wanted to do as the characters, as Uday being a much more tactile person and in charge, would be very physical. That made it much harder, because then obviously those two images that were placed on top of one another, it wouldn't work, and therefore we'd have to use head replacement, which is much more expensive and much more difficult to achieve.
Now,
which is basically essentially another body, my head put on another actor that's acting in the space.
Now, when you mentioned these parts and how dynamic they are, they couldn't be more different people. These two guys. I mean, Uday is one of the sickest people I've ever seen on the face of the planet, just based on the character you played, and then Latif's kind of this. He's a very subtle type of guy, but he's just kind of taking in exactly how sick this other guy is. And when you have to play both of these roles, I mean, I can't imagine what's going through your head, because you're switching from one person to the other. Were there ever moments where you were playing maybe Uday or Latif where you accidentally went into Latif or went into Uday in the wrong sequence?
It didn't seem to happen, because they felt, and I'd done the groundwork, I've done a fair amount of research, and what I tried to do, these characters are very loosely based on who these people are and were. So that meant it gave me a massive amount of freedom to really pull them apart and make them very distinguishable, which was essential, really, for the audience to believe in this illusion that these are two different people. I had to make them as different as possible. And therefore, actually, the headspace that I found myself in when performing Either Man was very, very different. They were very different physically. They sounded very different. And it actually just felt like they were coming from a different place within me. I can't really explain it any more than that. So I'd often not get mixed up. What was difficult was when Uday was having to when Latif was having to pretend to be Uday, which is true, which is what he had to do. He was ripped. He was a military man, a stoic, good man, a very simple man from a very basic world, was ripped out of that and put in this luxurious, ostentatious world, and had to present and pretend to be. He almost acted out being a hideous monster.
Right.
Now that was quite confusing, because I wanted to define that, and I didn't want that to get blurred either. I wanted you to see a man in a very, very difficult situation under an enormous amount of pressure, but having to pretend to be someone else, but do it well, but not brilliantly.
For people out there who are just tuning in, you're essentially playing three parts here. You have the Uday, you have the Latif part, and then you have Latif trying to be Uday. So does that mean you got paid triple for this role? You had to have gotten paid three times.
I wish that was the case, but unfortunately it wasn't.
Now, how much time did you actually actually, and forgive me for not knowing this, if you spent any time at all with Latif, because I've seen a bunch of interviews with him recently, because his story, he wrote these books. I think there's 3 books, I believe, and this is based off The Devil's Double. And then his story didn't really get popularized until about 2003. How much time did you spend with him, and what was the most shocking moment that he explained to you when dealing with Uday?
Everything that I unearthed about him, I found more and more repulsive, and I despised the man the more I found out. And it was wonderful having that opportunity to talk with Latif at length before we started filming. And it became very apparent that we weren't going to mimic him. It was not meant to be an accurate, descriptive, biographical account of him, but we were going to manipulate who this character was and the story for the benefit of a movie audience, make it more essentially a gangster film. But everything that he said, what was wonderful was actually to just remind oneself that these events did occur, that there was this man that was prepared to treat other human beings in this diabolical way. And that, sometimes the stories and the realizations are so far-fetched and so ludicrous, and it's so removed from our environment and what we understand to be true or possible, how people can actually treat one another like this. It was just incredible to have Latif actually talk of this in real terms. And I always was very clear that I didn't necessarily want to indulge too much in these stories and here too, because I saw a man who was both mentally and physically very scarred from the events that had taken place very recently.
Right.
So, in a way, I didn't want to interfere too much. And it was as though he would let on what he wanted to let on. And but each and every story about him was completely mesmerizing, compelling, and disgusting, and very disturbing.
Now, one particular scene in the film that really, really has stayed with me. I saw the movie 3 weeks ago, and I still, not on a daily basis, but every once in a while, the scene comes up in my brain, and I get teary-eyed because it was just so disturbingly shocking. And I won't give anything away specifically, but it was the scene where Uday essentially goes up to that woman on her wedding day and takes her. It was the most just shocking and disturbing thing I've ever seen. Seriously, in a film, that scene really blew my mind. But I want to ask, as a human being, you're an actor and you're taking on this role, but you're playing a very sadistic individual. Was it ever hard for you to ever go to that place in your head? I mean, you seem like the nicest guy on the planet. I'm interviewing right now. You seem like a really good guy. And when you have to kind of elevate your mind to that sadistic level, how tough was that for you? And does it ever disturb you in post after you've left the film that you had to go there as a character?
This was, it's a great question, and it's one that I found very hard to answer at the beginning, and I needed answers from Lee Tamahori, our director, because yes, I had been very excited about the opportunity to play these roles, but I found him repugnant, and I couldn't bear the idea of getting into the headspace of this man or looking through his eyes for any length of time.
Right.
And thankfully, I had the other character, Latif, as a form of relief, really. But I think what I ended up doing was just to try and understand the complexities of his psyche and the understand where that bile and hatred and revulsion comes from within him. And if you look at the guy's relationship with his father and who his father is, and how he was desperate to appeal to his father, and how his father never believed in his military capabilities or was never going to give him any the reins of power, let him take over his control of the country. Which I think is terribly insulting to that particular culture, where as an eldest son you expected to step into the shoes of your father. That was never going to happen. So that gave me a taste of the sort of resentment he was feeling. Then there was the idea of how much he loved his mother, which gave him some humanity. He hated his father's treatment of his mother. And you understand what he was exposed to as a youngster, which is scenes of torture and violence from the age of 4. Now, this never excuses or doesn't give me any empathy towards him, but it still at least was a key into understanding the way in which the inner workings of him, at least to sort of have some understanding of how anyone in any way could behave like that, which is so far removed from anything I know or understand.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine how you go there mentally. I mean,
it doesn't really stick with you afterwards, because you have to be able to just click into it and click out of it, because you're doing either character at any given time. And what does stay with you a bit is maybe your spontaneous reaction to certain events, or maybe your frustrations come out a bit more than you'd like them to, and maybe you're a bit more snappy with people when you're not. Simple things like that, but never really stuck in the mindset of that criminal.
Now, I know I have to let you go shortly here, but I have to say this, and I wrote this in my review 2 weeks ago when I saw Captain America. Before I knew I was interviewing you, and I'm not just telling you this because I'm talking to you, but you were my favorite part of that movie. I thought you played an amazing Howard Stark, and I wanted to.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, and I want to tie that into this film just based around the technology, because with the technology of Captain America and how they shrank down Chris Evans, and how some people had to look at his chin when they were acting in certain scenes because they had to shrink him down, and then now you're dealing with playing two different parts here, and the camera and switching around. As an actor, do you find that technology of this nature, like in Captain America and The Devil's Double, is that easier for you? Is it making it easier for you as an actor, or do you find that technology is it harder, like being on a set with the technology around? Do you find it harder as an actor, or is it making it easier for you?
That's another great question. It's varied, and in a way it's just more technique and more tools that you have to acquire and learn very quickly. The Devil's Double was such a learning experience for me, which I relished and really adored and loved being involved in and part of the creative formulation of ideas, because it was technically very hard to understand or work out a way in which we were going to do it, in terms of the fact that there was no one opposite me acting, and therefore it was eye lines were sort of dotted around, and I was having to second guess a performance that I hadn't yet given,
right?
And then I was having to remember the performance that I had given and remember where I was standing. It was very much in a very, very distinctive headspace, a very focused headspace. But I kind of just adored every aspect of it and how on earth it would be achieved. And the difference between something like Captain America and Devil's Double is Captain America, we had infinite funds, to get it right. And It's going to look good. And if it's not looking good, they shoot it all again. Because that's the nature of those big productions and why they look so beautiful at the end. Devil's Double was much more, take a deep breath and hope to God something good comes out. And also, what was difficult about that is I don't think it technically ever makes it easier. The difficulty is one of the things I enjoy most about acting is when you're acting opposite someone and you're making that eye contact, and a scene transforms from the first moment that you're acting in it to the end, to what the end result is. You're sparking off one another. You're listening, you're reacting, and you're responding in that given moment, which makes it completely exhilarating. When you don't have that, it's completely different way of working.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
But then again, it's just a different technique, and it happens more and more now. So you have to kind of get used to it, and you're using your memory in your mind, trying to focus on what that performance is that you're seeing, and you're imagining looking into that person's eyes rather than that person being there. But you do lose some of that freelance.
That's interesting to hear. I'll let you go. I know you're busy, and by the way, I cannot wait for Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. It sounds so badass. I cannot wait to see this.
It should be cool. It should be good. I'm really excited about seeing some of it as well. It should be really cool.
Cool. Are you where are you at right now? Are you in the States?
I'm in London right now, actually.
Are you shooting a movie?
Look, that's where I was in Washington. I was in the Shakespeare. That's where I was.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a theater called the Shakespeare?
I think I'm pretty sure. I haven't really been to too much theater in DC. I really should go more. I go to Broadway in New York a lot, but I really I think theater is just like.
You have good theaters there. You have great theaters there.
You should come back and do a show, man. Seriously.
I will. I'll try and work one out.
You should do a one-man show of The Devil's Double and then play both parts on stage. How cool would that be?
That is a fantastic idea. I don't know how I've achieved that, but it's a fantastic idea.
You got to put that on tour, man. I'm smelling a Tony Award. I see it coming, dude. All right, man. Well, listen, I'll let you go. Congratulations on the role. A phenomenal job to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work. And congratulations, and I'm looking forward. Everything you do is really dynamic, and you always play a different characters. That's really cool to see that.
Thank you so much, man. Great speaking to you.
Great speaking
Thanks.
to you too, man. Congratulations.